Well, we've gotten started. Welcome, everybody. I'll, of course, introduce Lucy to you. But thanks for coming here. This sounds very loud. Is this okay?
No, it's just right.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for being here. I know many of you have been here many times before. But for those of you who are new here, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. If it weren't for you, all of you customers, we wouldn't be able to offer the programming that we do. We have writing workshops and author talks and live radio theater performances. And really it is all possible because of people like you. So thank you again. And now I will introduce you to the woman of the hour. She is an award-winning author, blogger, independent journalist, and photographer. She's a former reporter for the New York Times Regional Group and served as authentic Florida expert for Visit Florida. She's the author of 50 Great Walks in Florida, which is my favorite of the books, The Zen of Florida Gardening, and the children's book Mary Margaret Manatee, which is available in English and Spanish. And she's also the author of the book that you have got to get today if you haven't already picked up, which is called Floating in Florida. So let's welcome Lucy Tobias.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
So I'm going to ask Lucy some questions, and then we're going to turn it over to all of you. So be thinking of what questions you might have as I'm asking them. So I wanted to start with asking Lucy, what is your history with this weird state that we live in?
This weird. That's a popular word these days. I came here to Gainesville, Florida as a young married with young children. And my husband at the time was a resident at Shands. He did a heart surgery residency. And that's how we ended up here in Gainesville. Lived right across from J.J. Finley School. And that's how it started. But as a child growing up, my dad was in the Navy and he was stationed in Key West and also Jacksonville. So I had Florida background there, yeah. And then when, I was on my own and finding my way in the world, I ended up freelance writing stories about what was happening around me. In fact, one of the first stories I wrote that sold to a print publication was people who lived in houseboats. So and went to work. They would step off the boat this woman stepped off the boat holding her high heels but wearing her canvas shoes. And she put the heels on for the office. And that's a whole lifestyle, and that's how it started. And I just was fortunate enough to interview Marjorie Stoneman Douglas while she was still alive. She was 99 at the time. She lived to be 106. And she talked a lot about how she was inspired to write her book and all the things that she loved about Florida. And I was driving away, and for the first time I realized that I was called to write about undiscovered Florida. That was my calling. She'd been called to write that book, The River of Grass. She got death threats from developers. They didn't want her to write that book. They wanted it to be a swamp, not a river. But she did it anyway. And when I'm driving away, I realized, well, on the rest of that's undiscovered Florida, and that's the way it's been ever since.
Mm-hmm. And how did you go about researching what you write about?
Thank God for the internet. I would go to libraries and spend time talking to research librarians that they would point me to a shelf and then I'd pull things out. Those days are gone. I research on the internet a lot. If I have a subject, like just say the tour boats, then I would say look at St. Augustine and then just look at the list, and then I'd see what kind of rides they were, whether I thought they were just promotional or whether it would be a good ride. There's a wonderful ride in St. Augustine with the Red Boat Tours, and they say we will see dolphins. Well, they will, because they know where all the dolphins live in the bay. And so you're going to see dolphins, and it's quite wonderful. And they're very respectful, they don't do all that. So research, you will find in any of my books, like 50 Great Walks. I took 80 walks and only 50 made the cut, because if I was having fun, you'd have fun. And in this one I did 22 altogether, and one didn't make the cut because it was a lunch cruise where it seemed to me that, it shall remain nameless, it would seem to me that the goal was who could get drunk the fastest and who could laugh the loudest. And the whole time there was this poor woman talking about the environment outside, which no one was looking at. That did not make the cut. So every boat tour in here is 1 to 2 hours. This is you're not going for a couple of days. This is a day trip type thing. And there's some very close to you too. Tarpon Springs with the diver. That was fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you write so much about Florida's wildlife, and so I'm wondering how your understanding of the natural world in Florida has changed over time, from when you first began writing to now.
Big changes. When I first started writing, it was, well, honestly, I was a newspaper reporter and I wanted to get out of the office. So I would propose assignments like, hey, how about we do the state parks that are in this county? You know, they're like, fine, go do them. I was like, so it was discovery. And I just assumed, naively, that the kinds of things I was writing about, like 50 Great Walks, would never be paved over. Boy, was I wrong. And I think that's been the big sea change, is that I naively assumed that everyone cared that this environment would stay. I mean, we preserve this park so that the river will run and the trees will provide CO2 and all of that, and the wildlife will have a place to live. And then one morning we wake up and we hear the governor wants to add amenities, like hotel rooms. It's just shocking to me. And that's been the big change. And the people I used to work with as a reporter in Tallahassee were dedicated civil servants. They believed in state parks. Those people are gone. They do not exist. In their place are, I don't know, developers' right-hand men and women. And so it's like, well, let's put in amenities like a hotel. I would not have even heard those words 20 years ago. So that's the big sea change, is now our public lands are considered commodities for development. That did not exist 30 years or 20 years ago. Yeah.
And how do you think, we were talking a little bit beforehand, so I would like for you to tell everybody here a bit about how writing on this subject, the changes that you've seen happen due to the attention that you put on the place.
Yeah, one of the first was a 3-part series on Florida panthers.
Here, let's switch microphones. Oh, my microphone's better. Okay.
It was about, definitely better. It was about Florida panthers, a 3-part series, and the New York Times wanted it, and they were going to syndicate it to all their other papers. I interviewed a total of 52 people. I literally had a list by my desk, and as I quoted somebody, I'd cross them off the list. One day I got an anonymous phone call, and this guy said, you need to look at the congressional record, and gave me the date. And I did. I went and found it. Well, it turned out that Congress had passed a law that said no endangered species could be put on national lands. And Florida, at the time, was busy developing a plan to put Florida panthers on national lands, because the left hand was not talking to the right hand. And I found out later that in Tallahassee, that, especially part 2 of that series, became required reading. And because they were so pissed that they had totally missed that. You know, they were gonna use national parks as a place to put panthers. And the Congress had already said no to that. The other thing that made a difference was, and I'm grateful to have been a reporter and had access to a media at that time which cared about fairness and accuracy. And so at one point we went to Walt Disney World for some kind of opening, and it was a huge opening, and they released balloons. Well, guess what? Balloons fall to the ground or fall in the water, especially turtles eat them, they think they're jellyfish. So I wrote a column about that. Now, I never found out who did this, but someone printed that column and sent it to every single legislature in Tallahassee, both houses. Every single legislator got a copy of that column. And the original bill had said something about you can release 500 balloons. It was reduced to 10 balloons. So it made a difference. I hope so. I mean, there's some sea turtles that are alive because of that.
I think that now you can't release any balloons.
That's fine, that's great, fine. They went all the way, yeah. So that being able to have a forum to be able to write. And then a few years back, this is nothing new with the state parks, they wanted to close, the state parks were gonna close all parks that got less than 20,000 people a year for visitors. Hello? That included Marjorie Kinnan Rollins, one of my favorite places. And so Audubon asked travel writers, to get on the stick and start writing stories about these places. Well, most writers wrote 1, maybe 2 stories. Well, Lucy got a little angry. And I wrote like 8, 10 stories. And Audubon on their Facebook page had over 2 million followers. And when they started reading these stories, which they were printing the whole stories with pictures, they bombarded Tallahassee, and the legislators went, and they gave that up completely. It's not about the numbers. It's about preservation.
So how do you, a lot of this makes you very angry, obviously, right? So how do you balance your love for the place with also your need to be able to accurately represent the complexities and challenges of it?
That's a really tough one, and I'm not a newspaper reporter anymore, so I can have more fun with the fun side of things. I can go out and do fun things and take you with me. I didn't always get to do that as a reporter, so I tend to have a little more fun now. and I don't, I'm not writing environmental things all the time. I'm kind of like pushing them in gently, whereas it's not the fate of the Florida panther or something like that. So at this stage of my life, it's about going out there and discovering the beauty and taking you with me.
Much more zen.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, zen. Oh, thank you.
Yes. Okay, you write about gardening, so I wanted to know a sort of typical gardening mistake that you made, a Florida gardening mistake that you made.
Lots of them. The biggest mistake I made was I downsized. When I moved here 13 years ago, I downsized from a house of 1,200 square feet to 950, and then about a quarter of an acre in the back. And I thought, well, I'm just not going to do anything that takes maintenance. Famous last words. I have 2 ponds, I have a butterfly garden, I have all this stuff going on. I think the biggest mistake I made was taking on projects that require maintenance. Endless maintenance. If you want the worst example, don't paint that concrete. I put a labyrinth. I painted a labyrinth on my veranda. Well, you got to paint it every year. You tend to forget that. Once you commit to do it, I think it's the worst mistakes. Is just doing projects that require so much maintenance.
What is a Florida gardening project that does not require maintenance?
Well, I would start you off with a nice big pot, and I would put the pot in a sunny place, and I'd put some nice jungle growth in it, and then I'd put in milkweed and pentas, and I would bring on the butterflies, and it's all happening right there in that pot, and you don't have to worry about anything else. You have complete control. It's easy. People say, oh, I can't get started, I don't have any property. Just get yourself a beautiful pot, and off you go.
It's sticking to natives.
Natives. You want to be as much natives, and that's a lesson I'm still learning. I mean, I used to go to nurseries like Troy's or Farm and Garden, and I'm looking for native plants, but and I'd have names of things. I don't do that anymore. I walk in, I wander around, and I see where the butterflies are going. I buy that, and it's working. I've got a lot more. Yesterday I saw big brown dragonflies in my back garden, so that made me happy. That was good. It's working. Yeah.
What are you working on now? What are you writing about now?
Well, I write a blog called Wednesday Notes, and it went on summer hiatus, and now it's back again. So I'll be finding things to write, and I write about the garden a fair amount in that. Plus, I take travels. Right now, I'm just taking a deep breath and launching this book out into the world. But there's like 3 or 4 different projects all raising their hands saying, me next, and we haven't quite decided.
Okay, so I want to open it up to some questions from all of you for a bit. So just raise your hand if you have a question and we'll point to you.
I'm wondering how you came up with this topic. What made you want to do?
That was a little daydreaming day about a year ago, and I have taken in the past 2 different river trips in Europe. and they were wonderful. One was a bike and barge, and it was incredible. That's really not on the agenda right now. Not to mention the fact that prices have gone up way beyond my zip code. But beyond that, I'm sitting there thinking, well, if I'm not taking a river cruise in Europe, what's out there? And that's when I got a map of Florida and I started seeing all those rivers and I thought, what's out there? You know, just not that far up the road in Dunellen, there's a guy who will take you out on the river and he will sing you songs that he wrote himself about his river. He's singing, it's absolutely wonderful. And I had no idea any of that there. And Jennifer Huber, she would raise her hand. Jennifer is a travel blogger and the founder of Solo Travel World. She is also, if you turn your book over, she wrote my review on the back. Thank you, Jennifer, for being here. But, you know, she was as surprised as I was when she started reading these things. We never knew they existed. And you have to just go find them and give them a try. And I was like, over the past year, I've done 21 trips, and I have the same feeling I did when I did the river trip in Europe. It made me happy, it was beautiful, I saw incredible scenery, I met new people. It had all those qualities, and it's right here in Florida.
I'm relatively new to Florida.
Yes.
And I went to Miami down across the old road through the Everglades, and I thought, oh, this is stunning. And I got out at like a nature center, and I said, oh, there must be some way to explore this. And then I heard this horrible sound, which I think were the boats.
Airboats.
Airboats.
Yeah.
Airboats.
And I thought, oh, that would be a disaster to look at this way. Is that, and that's, I think.
Yes, it is a disaster.
And how do you do it in a less, in a, you know, a reasonable
Every,
way like the Everglades?
Thank you, that's a very good point, thank you for that. I have been on the airboat once, complete with the earmuffs, you know, and we went through the Everglades, and I had nightmares. I mean, it really shocked the heck out of me. By contrast, these are all pontoon boats. The very first story is up there in Wakulla. Wakulla, the river, has been named in the Panhandle, south of Tallahassee. It's been named a national resource, and for the past 50 years, no human's been able to build a house or make a road. No boats, no airboats, no nothing, no kayaks. The only boat that's allowed is that tour boat, and it goes idle speed at 5 miles an hour. So not only are you seeing beauty, it's very quiet. And you'll find that every once in a while, something would roar by a little fast. And actually, down in Everglades City, when we took that boat tour, there were airboats that went by. But we never saw them once we got out there. It's called the Thousand Island Tours, all those islands out there. But are they a hazard? Yes, they are. And nothing like that is in this book. It's either going to be a pontoon boat or a double-decker boat, and it won't be going very fast, and it won't be hurting the environment.
Just, Lucy, do you have a favorite tour or one that you could suggest that you start off first?
Well, you could start off right here in Sarasota with the MOAT tour. That's a good one. But the one that I can't help but recommend is the only thing like it in Florida, and that's go up to Tarpon Springs. It's a day trip from here. And take the diver tour, you know, call ahead of time, and what happens is they take you out on the Anclote River, and the diver suits up the old way, the full suit with the weights, puts on over 200 pounds of weights, then they drop him over the side, and you see the bubbles going away from him. And then after a while he comes back and he's got a live sponge. Well, I'd never seen a live sponge before. And you're in Tarpon Springs, so I gotta say, when the Greeks are cooking, just show up. So, you know, you've got a twofer going right there for a day trip, and that's go on this tour and then go have Greek food. I would highly recommend that. The next closest one I would recommend is either the Dunellen, the singing guy, that could be a day trip, or go down to Fort Myers and do that trip that's in there. That was lovely. You know, some of these trips, they go by old mansions like Fort Lauderdale, and this is farther away. Fort Lauderdale, that's definitely an overnight. You're not doing that in a day. But Fort Lauderdale has not turned into Miami. They've gotten rid of their height restrictions, so it's only a matter of time before the dominoes fall. But right now, you float down this river, and there's these beautiful Mediterranean homes that were built in the 50s and the 30s, 40s, 50s. Awesome places. You're looking right into their backyards. It's incredible. Now, all of that will eventually disappear. I recommend doing that fairly soon. Actually, our guide said, give it 8 to 10 years, and then it'll be gone. So you got 8 to 10 years to go down to Fort Lauderdale and do a wonderful ride, but it's definitely an overnight. Yes, Lucy?
Is there any reason to go down the intercoastal slowly? Or will that just be a lot of other boats?
Well, I have been down the intercoastal slowly, and there are a lot of other boats. A lot of these trips, not a lot, a fair number of these trips are on the intercoastal.
Okay.
Yeah, and you will see plenty of other boats. Actually, the place I saw the most was when we were at Silver Springs State Park, and it was near Christmas time, and we're in this old pontoon boat. It's got a glass, some of these boats are glass bottom boats, and we're looking at things, and we were just inundated by canoes and kayaks, and everybody dressed like Santa Claus. It was the Christmas parade, the boat Christmas parade. Yeah. It wasn't loud, it was just, vibrant. Yeah.
Good.
What
Yes.
happened with the Panthers?
What happened with what?
With the Panthers?
What happened with the Panthers?
What is
I'm happy to say they're still with us.
Yeah.
And one of the highlights of doing that was I got to go down to the Everglades and up in the helicopter with the guys that do the tracking, with the tracking collars. And they were tracking a mother and her 2 cubs, and they came out of the den and we saw them.
Oh, wonderful.
And lately I've been seeing stories about panthers being sighted with cubs. You do know they were Texas panthers and they were brought here
Yeah.
to try to repopulate, and it's working. For how long? I don't know, but yes, the panther population is doing well. Yeah.
Okay, I have another question. What is the most hidden gem that you've discovered, would you say? Something we shouldn't look past.
Whoa, hidden gem. It isn't gonna stay hidden.
Expose it.
See, that's right. Jennifer will agree with this. It's one of the embarrassments of being a travel writer. You talk about places people shouldn't go. Because then it's not hidden anymore. I would say 2 places. Fort Lauderdale really surprised me how much I liked it. I was prepared not to like it because I'd already been to Miami and taken a boat tour, and that was horrible. I mean, as far as traffic and just the whole dealing with Miami, just getting there. But Fort Lauderdale was totally different. It's a place I'd like to go back to. I really don't know much about it. The other hidden gem, and it's hard for it to stay hidden, but you have to work at it, and that's St. Augustine. You have to get past the tram and the whole thing, and St. Augustine is amazing. But you have to really listen and hunker down and don't do the regular tourist things, but find the other things, yeah.
Oh, good.
What about the Mayaca River?
I did not include that trip, although I have been on the Mayaca. I've been on that. The boat that was on the Mayaca a couple years ago when I was on it, he said, we have more alligators per square foot, and if we have to get out of the boat, and he just didn't finish the sentence. And we were all like clinging to our seats, please, don't make us get out. The water was shallow, but none of us wanted to walk in that water. It's a very nice ride. It didn't quite, the guide and what we had to do didn't quite make it, but it's a good ride. I liked it.
I'm also wondering, what makes your guidebooks different from others that we'd see on the shelves?
Wow.
Well, I can answer some.
Of course,
Oh,
yeah.
it's her sense of humor. And her voice. I mean, she's so unique.
I like to tell stories, but I also think I have an overriding people, you go take the writing class, they say, what is your overreaching story arc? It's like, oh boy, here we go. Mine is everything is connected. And so when you're talking about the gardens, if I see butterflies out there, I better not be using pesticides or I won't have butterflies. I am connected to that butterfly by my actions. when I'm on the waterways and the captain said up in Wakulla, he said, we don't use the glass bottom boat anymore because you can't see the bottom. That's human intervention. That's nutrients going into the water all the way from Tallahassee. So I think thank you for that. It's really funny because I wrote a book, it is funny. I wrote a book about labyrinths, and the labyrinth person who wrote the introduction, one of the first things she said is, Lucy's sense of humor shines through this. I'm like, I have a sense of humor. But she's right. I want to be positive and I try to have fun, and I want you to come with me. Yeah.
And it's also not very commercial, meaning you can tell, we were talking about how you've never been to Disney World, something that is you take great pride in.
Sorry, I should know. Pride, we know what pride is. I try not to be. But my kids are proud of the fact that their mom refused to go to Disney World. Now, they went with friends and other relatives, but they never went with me. I did go to Epcot and covered it as a reporter. I've never been. You know why I haven't been? Because it's artificial.
Yeah.
And to give you an example of how bad that is I'm down in the Everglades researching for 50 Great Walks, and this guy comes up to the staff, to the park staff person there and says, I want to take a picture of my kid on that alligator over there. Well, she almost fainted. I mean, she was literally swaying. I thought she was going to faint. I'm standing right next to her. I'd been talking to her. He didn't realize that alligator was real. Why? Because he'd only been to Disney World. That's what bothers me. There's absolutely nowhere where you should sit your child when you were near an alligator. But he didn't know that because he hadn't been in real what's. You know, when they say the Florida state parks are real Florida, they're not kidding. It's real Florida. We need to keep them that way. Right. And I try not to be commercial. Thank you for saying that. I'm grateful for the writers that go out there and do high-end hotels and all that stuff. I'll tell you where the best coffee shop is, and then I'll take you for a walk or a ride on the boat. Yeah.
Can you talk to us a little bit about some of your favorite Florida writers?
Ooh. Marjorie Kennan Rollins impressed the heck out of me. Her bravery. Also, her ability to adapt. She'd been a feature writer. But when she got called to do this, she hunkered down and did her research and did what had to be done. And every once in a while, I just like to read it again. I was just trying to think of who I've read recently. I get into mysteries as a way to decompress. So, I liked Smith, doing the Florida things. I haven't done as much with Florida history as I should. I'm more seeing what's there now. But some of the people I've met along the way, travelers, they read historic history, they read the history of a place, and they only want to go to museums that have that history, and that's how they travel, is from one history place to another. The labyrinth people, they travel from one labyrinth to another. They actually they're like birders. They got life lists of places. So as I meet these people and at that levels, like I've read several labyrinth books lately that I liked a lot, but that's because I didn't even know what a labyrinth was until 2017. So I'm constantly discovering. Wherever I'm going, then I discover a new writer.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there a place that you haven't gone to in Florida that is on your list?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I don't know the upper middle, like Lake City and all in there. There's some beautiful places up in there. The Swanee, I don't know that. I would like to do that. I'd go back to Apalachicola in a heartbeat. And I like the land a lot. There's a boat trip there. And I like New Smyrna Beach. But the whole center, like go above Ocala, and there's this whole area in there. It's not quite North Florida, but it's very different than so. And I'd like to explore that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a hand over here.
Oh, I know an author you like, Carl Hyacin.
And I was thinking.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you. Carl was here recently. I've always enjoyed Carl. I thought he was very brave. The very first novel of his that I read, that he was taking on the environmental. And my mind doesn't work like that. I would love to be able to invent characters like he does, but I have to deal with real life. I can't seem to get away from it. I want to deal with real life. But I enjoy Carl very much, and He's got a way of spearing everybody, yeah, and make a difference. Yes, yeah. And he was here and spoke at that Eagle conference, and he was
Wasn't
excellent.
John McDonald one of the first to start?
John D. McDonald, thank you for reminding me of that. My dad was a
I read his
huge
books over and
yes.
over.
The Busted Flush, The Houseboat, my dad loved every one of those books, and so did I. I read every one of them in part, so I'd have something to talk about with my dad. John D. McDonald was incredible. He lived on Longboat Key. He would go fishing right across the street. There was the Intercoastal, and he'd sit there with a fishing rod, and he had 2 cats, and 1 cat would sit on either side waiting for him to catch them. So he'd have dinner, yeah. I wish I'd known him. Yeah, I would have liked to have, yeah. You know how he started? He was writing he was in the Korean War. He was writing letters to his wife, and she kept them. And when he came home, she said, you tell great stories, you should write. And that's how he started, yeah.
Any other questions?
Do you write for any other publications, magazines?
That's changed since the pandemic, a lot of it. I was, both Jennifer and I were part of Florida Outdoor Writers Association, and for a long time, a lot of print things going on. Now, not so much online. I do write for a couple of online publications, but I'm not writing much for print or newspapers anymore. And this book is an occasion, the Labyrinth book was an occasion when I call up newspaper editors and say, did you know you had labyrinths? And they say, what's a labyrinth? And I ended up writing stories for newspapers about the labyrinths in their areas. This book presents the same opportunities. What would it be? It would be feature writing. Would I like to do something else like environmental writing? Yeah, and I may be working up to that. I mean, I have some time now. We'll see where it goes. But print publications, not so much, and my first default would still be newspapers. I like newspapers. I like community journalism.
Any other questions? Okay, so Lucy's gonna hang around. She'll be sitting right there. So if you have your book that you want signed, then you can come. She'll sign it for you.
Okay, can I do a little shout out?
Of course.
I'd like to shout out to Jackie at Pastry Art who provided the cookies. They're free.
Please keep helping yourself.
And coffee and creativity go together. She was a little surprised when I told her this story. For the past year, every Monday I go to aqua yoga from 8 to 9. Then I get dressed, I go to Pastry Art, get a coffee, then I come home, I write my Wednesday notes, and then I worked on the book. Coffee and creativity. I couldn't have gotten this book done without it. And the other shout out is First Congregational United Church of Christ. Pastor West is here. Pastor West put this event in the midweek message. Can I get an amen? Yeah, thank you. And thank you all for coming.
Yeah, and thanks for being here. Lucy's, of course, one of our favorite authors, one of our favorite local authors, and so we always love to be able to celebrate her work whenever we get a chance. And as I mentioned, she has many books. So if we've sold a remarkable number of these books tonight. I think we are sold out of Floating in Florida at the moment. But please do make an order downstairs, and we can be here within 3 to 5 days. Go ahead.
How did you happen to move locally?
Move
Locally.
Oh, thank you for asking. I came here, let's see, I left the newspaper on my own accord, thinking it was time to do something else, just in time, before the axe fell and everyone was shown the door, about a year before. And 3 months later, I got a contract to write, from University Press of Florida, to write 50 Great Walks. So that started that whole new life there. I came here to Sarasota for a travel writer conference, the Society of American Travel Writers. And I came a couple of days early just so I could write some stories on the side for whoever, whatever. And I'm going over the John Ringling Bridge. It was Sunday morning, and I had the window down, and that salt air came in, and there were people running over the bridge. And I said out loud, I'm in the car by myself, this is where I'm supposed to be. I go home, I go see my pastor at first, that was then Presbyterian Church, and I said, this is what happened. And he said, oh, you've been called. And I said, called to do what? And he said, you'll figure it out when you get there. Without any foreknowledge, I sold my house and moved here, and 3 months later. And I found a realtor, Liz Nason, a fabulous realtor, found me a small house. And 3 months later, I packed in 1 dog and 3 cats and myself in a small car, and we came to show. I was literally called to come here. And I'm still trying to figure out what I'm doing. And that was 13 years ago. And you know what? I am so grateful to be here in this creative, supportive environment.
You're a local.
I'm a local. I hope so. What is it? You know, I was here for almost 6 months in Ocala. I was there for several years before this happened. But about 6 months, I was walking down Main Street and somebody said, Lucy, and I went, oh my God, somebody knows my name. And that's a big deal when you move to a new place, and to actually have somebody know that you live there. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
How long did it took you to accumulate these beautiful stories?
How long did it take you to write the book, right? To accumulate all the stories?
To accumulate the stories.
To accumulate the stories. Very typically 10 months to a year. At least a minimum of a year of research. Mark Benno, who is an incredible Florida butterfly writer, when he signs a contract for a book, he will not agree to anything less than 2 years. With me, with my kind of research, if I get on it and stay on it, you know, this is work. This is not, you know, it was fun, but it was work. It's going to be 10 months to a year, and that's before putting anything together in a book form. That's just doing the research and the work. Yeah.
Yeah, and it really shows. Obviously, all of your work is so thoughtful, very meticulous. And we are so proud to have you. Did you have a question?
I was just wondering if you have a list of your other books.
Yeah, I mean, we have them all. We have a list downstairs, but Lucy would be able to rattle them all off the top of her head, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
Bryn can tell you downstairs. I tend to forget the whole list, yes.
Go ahead.
I don't have a question, I just want to make a comment that I love your photography.
Oh, thank you. When I was first hired to work in newspapers, I was freelancing, writing and so forth, and taking pictures. And I took a darkroom course and fell in love with controlling light, play God in the darkroom. I don't know if any of you ever did that, but boy, it's great fun. And so I started taking a lot of pictures. The chief photographer at the local paper in Anna Maria, which at that time was owned by the New York Times, was leaving for a different job. And he came to me one Sunday morning when I was having breakfast, and he said, you have an appointment for my job this afternoon. I went, so I went and applied, and that was my first job in newspapers, was as a chief photographer for a small paper, and then I worked up to being a writer too. But I tried as long as I could to keep the two together, take pictures and do words. You know, the bigger the paper, the more they want to separate you. Only photographers take pictures. Writers write. Right. Yes.
So we've lived on Anna Maria for 34 years.
Yes.
And did I hear you say that the New York Times
It did at one time own that paper, and it had to sell that paper because it bought the Sarasota Herald Tribune. It was a conflict of interest to have that paper so close.
Which paper was it?
The Anna Marie Islander.
Really?
Yeah.
When did that happen? Rough.
Early, well, I don't know when they bought it, but I showed up in the early 80s. My name was Lucy Beebe then. No, not my maiden, that was my maiden name, no. But anyway, the Times owned it, but then they had to sell it because they bought the Sarasota Herald Tribune. Don Moore was the editor when I was there. That was, if you go back that far. Don Moore went on, you talk about making a difference in the world. Don Moore went on to end up at the Venice Gondolier, and he realized that World War II veterans were dying rather rapidly. And he started interviewing them and writing columns about them, and he has over 1,000 columns which are in the Library of Congress as a national heritage thing. Yeah. Capturing these people before they passed on. That was worthy, very worthy.
Okay, thanks guys. We'll leave some time again for the signing, and please order all of Lucy's books downstairs. And let's thank her.